And your address?
2118 Washington Road.
How long have you been here?
We moved here with my folks in 1919.
Where did you live before?
We lived around Matamora before we came here.
And what nationality are you?
My folks was German. My grandfolks came from Germany. Yeah.
Okay. Now, when and where were you born?
I was born in 1907, south of Washington, near Cooper Station.
Okay. What do you remember about earlier life, settlement, growth, and development of Sunnyland?
When we moved here, there was no houses in Sunnyland or Beverly Manor, unless a farm home happened to be in that location.
Do you remember when your ancestors came to America?
My grandmother came to America about 1840.
Who were your ancestors?
My grandmother was Friederike Seibold from Germany on my mother's side. My grandfather, John Wagner, came to America from Germany about 1850.
What type of diseases were common then?
The diseases mostly in those days, which was considered more serious, was typhoid, diphtheria, and of course tuberculosis.
What type of roads were there?
All roads in the small communities, like past here, were of dirt. There were very few gravel roads at that time.
What kind of schools were there?
Schools were of the one classroom in different locations in rural areas or in towns.
What particular school did you go to?
I went to the Hopewell School, which is now not used now.
Is the school building still standing?
Yes, the school building is still standing.
Did they call it Union 76 School? Is that perhaps?
No, it was always, as far as I know, it was called Hopewell.
What kind of jobs and how many jobs were there?
Most of the jobs in those days in farm areas, of course, was farm hands and farmers, and of course some people worked at factories or in cities.
And how many were there?
There was jobs for, I'd say, most of the people in those days that wanted to work.
What types of stores were there?
The stores were of the one-room type store, which you could get most anything you wanted to in the same store, maybe some clothing. Sometimes you could do your banking, sell your cream, sell your poultry if you had some, and get some clothing if you wanted to. Pretty well all in the same store.
Do you know where your ancestors were buried?
My grandfolks on both sides of the family was buried in the Union Cemetery, northwest of Washington. My folks are buried in Washington.
Okay. What types of transportation did your ancestors use to get here?
Well, most of the transportation in those days was horse and buggy or horse and wagons. Of course, there was a lot of cars coming. By that time, there was more cars on the road. The roads wasn't very good for cars.
Is the weather the same as when you came here?
Well, I think we have milder winters now than we used to have. In back in the 20s and maybe a little before, why, we used to have an awful lot of snow.
Why did you choose this area?
Well, my grandfolks and folks was farmers and truck gardeners, and they found out that this country close to Peoria and this type of soil was considered some of the best for truck gardening or farming.
Could you describe your family life in sort of simply, not in great detail?
In those days, of course, families stayed more together. The older children generally stayed home longer and helped raise the younger children. There wasn't so many places to go to as far because you didn't have the transportation means as you have now. Neighbors got together more, families got together and had more fun in their homes. And
could you describe your home?
the homes that was in those days was, I'd say, well-built homes. If they got a little small for the families, why they built more on, and families was some larger in those days, maybe.
Okay. How populated was the area when your ancestors arrived and so forth?
Well, of course, when my grandfolks came, why, mostly farms, besides smaller towns or cities. And there's mostly farm homes at that time where people lived to farm, and maybe close sometimes, maybe quite a distance between each other.
Do you remember any of the people that lived here when you came here?
Well, yes, like I say, there was mostly all farmers. Mr. Aaron Holtz lived the first house east of Beverly Manor, across the road. Our house, which is where I live now, down the road was the Adam Goldman family. Down the road from them, about 3/4 of a mile, was a big Andy Smith dairy and stock farm. And of course, now we're getting down in Sunnyland. Three different goose lived there at that time. It was Joe Good, and Amos Good, and John Good. That pretty well takes you down to Sunnyland.
Where did you marry? I mean, who did you marry?
My wife was from Brimfield.
What were the first banks?
First banks, of course, we'll say in the city of Washington, or town of Washington, was the Denhart Bank, which was located where the reporter office is today. The Danforth Bank was located over on the other corner where the Federal Loan Company is now.
Okay. What kind of Indians were here when you came?
There was no Indians in those days anymore. I don't think even when my grandfolks came here, if there were, they probably was more civilized, probably the farmers.
Okay. How many Indians were there around that time?
As far as I know, in this part of the country, there wasn't any.
Okay. What kind of communication did you have?
Our communications at that time was, of course, the telephone was one of the main ones, and the mail, and people visit more together and passed word from family to family.
Okay. What kind of communication, what kind of transportation was there when
Well, the transportation, of course, was mostly horse and buggy, and like I said before, there was cars coming. There was quite a few cars and trucks, and of course, if you wanted to go very far, you drove to the first town and then took the train.
Okay. How much did the land cost when you moved here?
At that time, ground around in this part of the country was, I'd say, up to $300, mostly less,
$300
an acre.
Okay. What was courting like then?
Well, about like now, only people didn't travel so far. You went to visit your neighbors, or you went to the show, or went to the Grange. The Grange always existed in this part of the country, and so it's the way people visited more that time.
How was your social life?
Well, it was about the same as now, I'd say.
Okay. Who were some of the earlier political leaders?
Well, I just don't remember too good about the first president that I can remember much of, I guess, was from the First World War, and then later on when Hoover was in, when the Depression come along, and then of course Roosevelt's time.
Okay. Where did you get your first tools, your tools that you used?
Well, the tools, a lot of the tools in those days, larger tools was maybe made by a blacksmith, or the hand tools you can mostly always buy in a hardware store like you can today.
Was there much crime then?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
Was there much crime then?
Yes, there was crime, but then crime was a little different in those days. Who committed a crime was really looked down on, and your crimes weren't so violent as today. If you played jokes on somebody or something, like tonight on Halloween, it was mostly a joke. It wasn't destructive so much as it is nowadays.
What kind of clothes were worn?
Clothes was more of the durable type. Farmers, of course, wore overalls. City people wore the more durable type clothes that I'd say that wasn't, well, the styles didn't change so often as they do now.
What was hunted at that time?
Hunting around here at that time was mostly rabbits and squirrels. At night hunting, if somebody wanted to go coon hunting or possum hunting, there was very few birds shot in those days. Maybe some ducks.
What types of farming were there? What type of farming was there?
Oh, the farming in those days, most everybody, of course, had livestock. And they would, it was a rotation type of farming. That is, we'll say a farmer had a field in corn. The next year he planted a field in oats. At the same time, he seeded in some kind of hay, probably clover. He cut and threshed the oats, and the seeding grew up into a field of hay. He made a cutting or two of hay and plowed it up the next fall or spring to put it back into corn, which was fertilized by the fertilizer from the barns and cow yards and hog pens, and there was very little fertilizers bought in those days. The fertilizer was accumulated on the farm and went back on the ground again.
Right. That pretty well describes the farming technique. Do you have anything you want to add to the farming technique?
Well, uh, farmers could easily get along on 140 or 160. He did the farming with horses or, in those times, a lighter tractor. He didn't have the expense of a big tractor, and if a farmer had 140 or 160 paid for, as a rule, he didn't have to hire any help, or maybe his outside of his family, and he made enough to make a living on that place besides his garden and so forth.
Do you have any additional comments you might like to state?
Well, no, I don't. I don't think so. I don't think you asked me too much about Beverly Manor.
Well, you go ahead and take it from here and say what you want to say about anything.
Just a minute.
Okay. And you said you wanted to add some more about Beverly Manor.
Yes, when we first moved here, of course, all of Beverly Manor was just a field. There was no houses on that side of the road. I gave the names of the people that lived on the north side of Route 8. But like I say, there was no houses in Beverly Manor. All the way down, clear through Sunnyland on the south side of the road, until you got clear down to the I guess Christian church in Sunnyland. From there on, of course, there was houses on into East Peoria. But even below the John Goods farm, of course, was Sunnyland. And Sunnyland, when they first started that, was in about 1934. They started laying out lots and laying out streets, and some of the first houses was about down near the Doring addition, and the Doring school was mostly built up, and then of course it built on up the road. Then it went across the road mostly on the south side, and pretty well built up there, and kept it coming on up the road, and then built where the ballpark is now on the south side, and finally went on over, clear over south to back to the other road. But it was laid out in roads in Beverly Manor and Sunnyland too, and then houses started building. I guess most of the kids went to Doring School for years until Hennessy was built.
Where is Doring School at now? Has it been torn down? Doring School?
No, I think Doring School is still down Sunnyland, isn't it, on the north side of the road down there?
Sundor School?
Sundor, I guess. Yeah, I guess you call it Sundor. The schools that used to take the place of them around here, of course, there wasn't as many kids that went to school then, was, of course, Hopewell, and then over north further was Columbia.